like to now introduce our scholar in residence, our guest. Not really a guest because he's lived in our community for 8 years, but he has been away for 7 years. Rabbi Avrohom, who we all know, we all remember, and we are privileged that he's come to be our scholar in residence this year for Yarchei Kallah. And the lectures are all from him, as he'll explain. He also gives the 10 o'clock shiur as well, which is connected to the theme which he himself will explain in today's lecture. You see it on the screen behind me, so I do not need to spell it out to you. So please welcome Rabbi Jax.
Thank you, Rabbi Grona. As I mentioned this morning, I am so excited to be here, especially since we had like the worst snowstorm in Toronto history, at least in the 7 years since I've been living there. So I left my poor wife to deal with that, and I get to enjoy this beautiful weather. Although yesterday was a bit iffy. Anyway. Yeah, tomorrow I want to go back to Toronto, I think. Awesome. So, as Rabbi Grona had mentioned, there is a theme, and the theme is primarily my upcoming book. My book is called Stress Less, Prosper More. And it's a book about conquering financial anxiety and inviting abundance into your life. So it'll be, please God, published within the next couple of months, in 1.5 months' time. And you're going to get a sneak preview as we go through the next 7 lectures. I'll cover some of the content that's in the book. So the first section of the book and today's lecture is called Money Cannot Buy You Happiness, but It Can Buy You a Yacht. I believe it was Gertrude Stein who said that people who think that money cannot buy you happiness don't know where to shop. Yep. So I'm going to start being a little bit vulnerable here and share something very personal, if I may. We'll just keep it amongst ourselves, if that's okay. Won't let it get out of this room. So there was a time in my life that I had some tremendous financial difficulties. So to put it in context, back in the day, I was $2.5 million in debt. Some of that was due to the CRA, which is the Canadian Revenue Agency, your ATO, equivalent of your ATO. And I used to tell people that I was a sleep champion. What I mean by a sleep champion is even in my 20s and 30s, I was able to go to sleep and sleep uninterrupted, blissful, restoring, refreshing sleep for about 8 hours, 9, sometimes 10. And I knew that that was unusual amongst my peers, that I was able to sleep so deeply. But then, when my financial crisis struck, all of a sudden I wasn't such a good sleeper. So 2-3 hours was considered good. I wouldn't wake up refreshed. I would toss and turn, had 7 kids in private school, thinking I would wake up in a cold sweat thinking, what if they kicked my kid, expelled my kids out of school because we're missing payments? And I would think, what if we couldn't cover the mortgage and I'd be kicked out of the house, my parents' home? And I considered, I also thought, what if it was my fault? What if I wasn't responsible enough with how I managed my financial affairs, and therefore I am the one who brought this upon myself? The anxiety was terrible. We'll go, yeah. I'll speak louder then.
Stay by the microphone.
Stay with the microphone? Okay. Yeah, I have a transmitter. Okay, no problem. I'll try and stay by the microphone. So there I was experiencing the worst anxiety of my life. And I made a few decisions. The first decision that I made is that this would not define the rest of my life. I would not allow the anxiety to rob me of the pleasures that I enjoyed before and that I hope to enjoy in the future. And I was determined to find out what I could use to alleviate this anxiety. So I know that a lot of people, when they write a book, they do research. I did me-search. What that means is I looked at a whole bunch of different modalities, different options to try and reduce my anxiety. And whatever worked made it into the book, as long as there was evidence that backed it up and said that it would work. At about the same time, I started learning, and I'll tell you the story of how that happened in a future session that we have together. But I started learning Shar HaBitachon. That's what we learn in the morning at 10 o'clock here. And that was a source of tremendous strength for me. And I found that there was so much in there that was so helpful in terms of me dealing with the anxiety. So am I a sleep champion? Not quite. I haven't gone back to my old, but certainly I will tell you that I have very little anxiety. What's that?
You get out of debt?
Yeah, pretty much debt-free at the moment. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so there's, I don't know if you know, but there's a mental health epidemic that is going on at the moment. And here's some statistics. These statistics start from 2010, 2010. And so look at schizophrenia. There's been a 67% increase since 2010. But it's not such a common complaint, so therefore it's barely registering. Substance abuse and addiction has been raised 33%. Anorexia, 100% increase in anorexia. Bipolar disorder, 57% increase. ADHD, 72% increase. What was I saying again? Oh, no, sorry. ADHD. Depression, 106% increase since 2010. Anxiety, the champion, 134% increase in people that have clinical anxiety that needs to be treated by a professional and by using pharmaceuticals. Now it is, if you dig down a little bit into the data, it is a little bit, there is a difference based on people's age. So obviously people who in the 50 plus category, we're doing okay. About 8% decrease since 2010. But the 18 to 25 category, 139% increase in anxiety since 2010. So why do you think that is, by the way?
You need to also add to that children.
Correct, you're right.
They're not raised to have children.
Children, yeah. In 2008, a device called the iPhone came onto the market. What's that? No, only about 90%. Yeah, I agree. It's not all that. No, it's absolutely not all that. Right. Okay, so good point. So let me address some of those. There's a book, a really interesting book. Right. Yes.
Somebody can give comments on the other side.
Yeah, I'll say. Yeah. So the comment was, we cannot lay the blame for anxiety, the anxiety epidemic, solely at the feet of the iPhone. There are other things that are contributing to it, and I do agree with that. There's a book called the...
Sorry, you can take the microphone.
Of course a lady would come up with that. Ah, you have freed me, thank you. If you want me to stop talking, just tie my hands behind my back and my feet, and that's the end of the lecture. So there's a book called The Anxious Generation. And in The Anxious Generation, the author says two things are contributing to the youth. And you're right, there was a comment also that we need to go younger. And it's absolutely true that we need to go younger. The statistics of 12 to 14-year-olds is just...
Younger.
And younger, but I have the 12 to 14-year-old statistics, and it's quite shocking. So in this anxious generation, she posits that there's two reasons that children are so anxious. Present company excluded, but except for the people in this room, it's the parents' fault. It's always the parents' fault, right? Parents are doing two things wrong, according to this book. The one thing that parents are doing wrong is that they're stranger danger. They're over-dramatizing the danger out there, right? The world is such a dangerous place. That's the message that they're giving their children. It's dangerous out there. People want to harm you. It's not true, by the way. Statistically, the world is becoming safer and safer. Decade by decade, the world is becoming a safer and safer place. But parents we do tell our children that there's dangers out there, don't play out when it's late, come back in, we protect them, and we're a little bit overprotective, and it sends a message of fear to the children. The other thing that parents do is that they are totally underprotective of the online life of their children. In other words, their children are experiencing things in their pocket, basically. They have the world in their pocket, and they're experiencing things from that perspective that are truly dangerous, truly dangerous. In Ontario, which is the province that my city of Toronto is in the last 4 years, there's been a 700 times, that's not 700%, that's 700 times increase in the amount of teenagers that have attempted to take their lives. And I'm not sure that that's an outlier statistic, it's just the only one I know. And it's coming, there's a lot of it is coming from the online world that children are experiencing, where they're held to impossible standards, and they're taught how to take their lives and how to self-harm themselves in a whole bunch of ways. And parents have no control over that because it's very private, it's very intimate, the children are alone with their smartphones, and there's no, so all of this, according to the anxious generation, is contributing to anxiety and this epidemic that we're seeing. There's another study, 2023, a study of American college students. 37 plus 31% of college students, means 2/3 of college students have a feeling that they are at least half or more of their time, in a conscious time when they're awake, they are in a state of anxiety. More than 2/3. That means only 1/3 of American college kids are not feeling anxious most of the time. It's in your body, it can manifest in your emotions, and it can impact your thoughts. So when it comes to body, people feel tension, tightness, abdominal or chest discomfort, and many, many, many other symptoms of anxiety. When a person has a panic attack, which is an extreme form of anxiety, they can literally feel, and they do literally feel, that they are having a heart attack. And a lot of people go to the emergency room thinking they're having a heart attack and they're having a panic attack. But if a person is in a state of anxiety, they will have a lot of these, symptoms. In terms of emotions, one feels dread, worry, exhaustion. In terms of what we're thinking, it's rumination, constantly thinking about things, distorted thinking, which we'll speak about in the fourth lecture that we'll have together. we'll speak a little bit more about the cognition aspects of it. Okay. This is a Hebrew word. Does somebody want to read the word for me? Daga. What does that mean? Worry, anxiety, everything I've been talking about is summed up by this word daga. Now watch something really interesting about this word. Look at the slide. The word daga has all the letters, the first 5 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. There's an aleph, a gimel, a dalet, and a hey. Which letter is missing? The letter base. The letter base stands for the word bitachon. Bitachon means trust in Hashem. So my book posits, it's not my book, it's not my thoughts, it's Shara Bitachon, it's much of the greatest Jewish minds, posits that one of the key cures, if you will, one of the key ways to address daga, to address anxiety, to address the fear, the worry, the concerns that we may have, is through bitachon. And so my book is about conquering financial anxiety using bitachon. And for those who were here in the morning, we already started seeing that the seminal work on bitachon that we're studying together, Shara Bitachon, is he starts off, and he's already said, we've learned it together this morning, and we'll go in more depth tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. He's already said that one of the positive outcomes, upshots of having bitachon is that you have menucha anxiety. Yeah. I got anxious there for a second because I couldn't find it. Now I have it, I feel calm. Not good. Okay. Together with anxiety, there's also an epidemic of depression and sadness. And it's getting worse. It's getting worse. So there's this fascinating study, the University of Warwick did this study. And what they did is they went through multiple languages, English, German, Spanish, Italian, I'm probably missing a few. And they went through those languages and they gave a score, a sadness score or an upset score, to each word. So let's say the word joy, for example, would get a very low score, probably a 0. The word anxiety would get a 10, right, in the English language. And then they looked at 8 million books, 65 million articles from magazines, newspapers, starting from about 150 years ago. And they went through, they put all of these articles and books through a computer. And the computer went and it worked out what the unhappiness score was of each article. And then over time, they saw that the trend was negative. In other words, at least as far as what we're writing about, and assuming that writing books and articles is kind of capturing what we're thinking and the language that we're using, they worked out and they calculated that everything that we're becoming far, far more unhappy as time is progressing. Now, there's no reason why we should be unhappy, because the world is getting a much better place. If we would go back even 100 years, and we would see how people lived 100 years, 150 years ago, and compare them to the technological advances that we have in our lives today, we are objectively, if we would go back to our great-great-grandparents and tell them about the lives that we live, how literally on Sunday night, I was in Los Angeles, California. Then something happened to Monday, it just disappeared, and Tuesday I was in Melbourne. And that is the most amazing thing, if you think about it, how big this world is, and that I'm here in a 14-hour, 15-hour airplane flight. It's remarkable. And we have Roombas, and we have microwaves, and we have ChatGPT. We're living a most extraordinary life. The wealth that exists, even amongst the most impoverished of us, is unprecedented in human history. How safe we are is unprecedented in human history, and I'll address that more in a moment. And yet, if you look at the war we study, we're getting more and more upset, and more sad, and more fearful. It's interesting that, and of course, the many studies, including the American Psychological Association Stress in America study, which is an annual study that they do, where they look at Americans and see what Americans are suffering from in terms of mental health. And they say the number one source of anxiety is financial. The number one source of anxiety. And that, every year for the last 20 odd years that they've been doing this study, has been more and more true every single year. Anxiety has been at the top of the list. Okay. So, I'll change things up a little bit, make it a little bit lighthearted before we jump back into the heavy stuff. This man comes to a psychologist, and he says to the psychologist that he's suffering from depression. And the psychologist whips out the psychiatrist whips out his notepad, and he writes on the notepad a prescription. And the prescription is for Tiki the Clown. Tiki the Clown is a circus act. And he writes Tiki the Clown, and he gives it to the man, and he says, go to the circus, look at this clown. This clown is so hilarious that anybody who is suffering from any kind of unhappiness, depression, whatever, a few minutes with the clown, and they're instantly cured. And the man said, oh, it's not gonna work. And the psychiatrist says, I don't wanna hear. I've given far worse cases than yours, and they've gone to the circus, few minutes with the clown, they've come back A-okay. This will work. He said, it won't work. You don't understand. I am Tiki the Clown. So, why are we so sad? If life is getting objectively better and safer and more prosperous, why are we getting more sad and more anxious? So the answer is, I think, partly because we have a propensity as human beings for negativity bias. What is negativity bias? Negativity bias means like this. A person has a social media feed. They post something on social media. They get 100 amazing comments. Wow, so inspirational. I love that, Rabbi. You made my day. 100 like that, right? And one that says that's negative. And which do you think about the whole day? The negative one. The negative comment. But why? You had 100 to 1, positive to negative. And the thing that's going to worry you as you're tossing and turning, trying to fall asleep at night, is that one sad individual who said something negative and who insulted you. Why is that the case? So it's called negativity bias. And we all have it. And the truth is, if it was 200 years ago, it would be a good thing. I'll tell you why. Let's say it's 200 years ago. And I said the world was much less safe than it is today. So 200 years ago, two friends are walking down a path in the forest. And they hear a rustling of leaves behind a bush. So the one friend, he's really afraid. He's a scaredy cat. He runs. He runs. He darts he runs as fast as he can run. Now his friend, the other one, is really macho. He's a real, man's man. He's not afraid of anything, right? And so he says, you scared coward, running away like that. I'm not afraid. I'm not moving. I'm not budging. Yeah, a little leaf ruffling is going to make me budge. So the lion jumps out of the thing and eats the guy who stays, right? the coward, he still survives. And if there's some genetic predisposition to being cowardly, he passes on that genetic predisposition to his children. And they pass it on to their children. Now, I said that the world was a much less safe place than it is today. It was a much more dangerous place, and that's true. Which means that our ancestors, if there was any, cowardly gene or anxiety gene, they bred it into us over time, right? So that's why that one comment in social media is going to take up all that space. We predisposition towards it. And let's put it more in spiritual Jewish terms. Hashem created us, as Alter Rebbe teaches us in Tanya, with an nefesh abahamis, an animalistic soul, which is an amygdala. The amygdala in your brain is the nefesh abahamis. It's frightened, it's very primitive. It hears a rustling in the bush and it runs. It sees a negative comment and it ruminates on that negative comment. But what we really, and what we sent into this world, what Hashem sent us into this world for, our mission, is to elevate the nefesh abahamis, is to use our nefesh elokis, the godly part of ourselves, to elevate the animalistic side of ourselves, the primitive, reactive side of ourselves, and put it into a pedestal that is higher, into a state that is more spiritual, more filled with bitachon, with that trust, with that absolute reliance on Hashem, and less with fear. And this is our life mission. And it is a life mission. Some people are lucky, and their ancestors were the brave thing, and they just never got eaten by a lion or something, so therefore you were born. And so you're less fussed about things that are taking place in your life. You're less nervous about the future. And that's great. But still, you can improve. There's still room for improvement. I'll tell you a really cool story that I heard from my mentor, Reb Mendel Futterfass. So Reb Mendel Futterfass was a guest of Stalin's. He was on an all-paid vacation to Siberia, to the gulags of Siberia. And he spent several years in Siberia. Before that, he was also incarcerated in prison. And there was a group once approached him one day. And one of the group was a former university lecturer. Another member of the group was an engineer. And another member of the group was an actor. And they came up to Reb Mendel, and they had a question for him. They said, Reb Mendel, why are you so happy all the time? And Reb Mendel turned to them and he said, why are you so sad all of the time? They said, what do you mean, why are we so sad? I was this university professor. I enjoyed so much. Everybody gave me cover. I had credibility. I was well known in academia. I was well respected. The actor said the same thing. I enjoyed such a beautiful life of an actor. And the engineer said, I built bridges and buildings. And now all three of these gentlemen are like sitting in a cell, in a frozen wasteland, and totally, all of their potential totally wasted. So they said to Reb Mendel, what are you talking about? Why are we sad? Isn't it obvious? Is it obvious why we're sad? And they explained that we've lost so much. You know what Reb Mendel told them? Reb Mendel said, that's why I'm happy. I've lost nothing. I served Hashem before this all happened. I'm serving Hashem now. And I find joy in that. I am fulfilling my purpose and my mission in life. And that did not change one iota. All right, so that's what my book is about. It's about how to find the joy, how to find the serenity and the calm, despite anything that might be happening around you. And so what I did is, as I said, it was me search. I looked into a lot of things, and I put everything together in a framework, which I call the PEACE framework, P-E-A-C-E. So each one of those letters stands for something, and it brings you to peace. So I thought that was pretty clever to do it that way. Anyway, so the P stands for positive thinking. Positive thinking is the power that we have to shape our reality just by changing the thoughts that we have in our mind. That's what P stands for. The E stands for embracing challenge. So many of us experience at different times in our lives different degrees of challenge. And what the E is it's everything I've found of how we can reframe that challenge so that we can be we can be at peace with the suffering. The A stands for appreciation, and that's the power of gratitude. Gratitude is a very, very powerful tool to reduce anxiety, and that's actually been scientifically proven. The C stands for certainty. Now, certainty here means two things. It means trust in God, absolute certainty in Hashem, or bitachon, as we call it. And it also means certainty within ourselves, that Hashem has given us every single thing we need to accomplish our mission on this earth and to achieve success and to do it with a minimum amount of anxiety. And the final E stands for empathy. And that's about giving. You know, when you're anxious, you're very inside your own head. It's a very internal feeling. You're very focused on yourself. If you force yourself to reach out to somebody else and give them and help them, then it reorients your anxiety, and your anxiety will dissipate as well. So this is my framework, 5 steps. So for the next week that we're going to be spending together, starting from tomorrow, I will start with P, and we will do 1 letter every single session, and then we'll do a wrap-up session at the end. So that's what the series of lectures is going to look like. And when you all buy my book and give it a 5-star review on Amazon, then you'll be able to dive even deeper. But we'll cover a lot of the ground over the next, a lot of peace ground over the next 5 lectures, starting from tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to that journey together with you. Okay, so before I deal with financial anxiety, I want to ask a question. It's a strange question, but the question is it a sin to be rich? In other words, if you would imagine a holy tzaddik, a righteous person, a person who's devoted their life to becoming more godly and spreading godliness within the world. Typically, most people I ask to describe such a person have told me that the person has taken some kind of a vow of poverty, or they certainly not, you don't imagine a very saintly person living in a mansion in Hollywood that's worth $100 million. I don't know. Most people, when you think of holy tzaddik, you don't think of somebody living in a $100 million mansion. Or you don't think of Elon Musk. Actually, some people are starting to think of Elon Musk these days as a very holy person, but depending on your political bent. We don't typically think of wealthy people as being saintly or godly, or money making you more holy. We don't typically think of that. So let me tell you a fascinating story. The Rebbe, in the early years of the Nesius of the Rebbe's leadership of the movement, the Rebbe taught every Simchas Torah a nigun. The Rebbe taught a nigun. And one year, the Rebbe taught the most beautiful nigun of Anim Zmiros. It's a very haunting melody, a very spiritual melody, slow song, Anim Zmiros. Because I want you to come back tomorrow, I'm not going to sing it. But the Rebbe taught the Hasidim that nigun that year, Simchas Torah. And the Rebbe also gave the fascinating context behind the song, where the song came from, how it was composed. And the Rebbe said that what happened was that there was a person, the Rebbe didn't say what the person did, but there was something that this person did that made an incredible impression in heaven. They were so impressed with an act that this person did. And so heaven offered him one of 2 possible rewards. Either he could become fabulously wealthy, become very wealthy, or he could be exposed to the bliss that the neshama, that the soul experiences in heaven, and he'll live to tell the tale. So normally, if you want to get the heavenly bliss, Gan Eden, paradise, you have to, it's pretty inconvenient because you have to die. That's the only way you can get it. But this guy, he could get spiritual bliss and remain alive. So money or bliss? What would you choose?
Money is bliss.
Do you want to cut? That was okay. I'm going to use that the next time I give this class. Is there anyone who would take the bliss? Yeah? Yeah? Sure. Okay. Cool. All right. So what the person did, he took the bliss, like you. He took the bliss. He didn't take the money. And they exposed him. He was exposed to the spiritual ecstasy after Yom Kippur. So after Yom Kippur, he took his foot, he put it up on a bench, like this. Everybody, after Yom Kippur, you kind of run home. Most people are a little bit hungry. I don't know if that's ever happened to you after Yom Kippur, but hungry. You run home, and you go and you eat. But he stayed. And he got this ecstatic experience at that moment. And while he was standing there with his foot on the bench, he started to compose this song, this melody, under his mirrors. And he composed the song, and now the Rebbe is teaching it to everybody. Okay, so afterwards, the Hasidim were talking, and this idea took hold. Listen to the idea. Maybe it was the Rebbe himself. The Rebbe spoke of it as if it's third person. This person got a reward and he chose this and not that. But people started thinking, maybe it's just the Rebbe's classic humility. The Rebbe was so humble. Maybe it was the Rebbe himself. So there was a chassid, his name was Reuben Dunin, and he had a very special relationship with the Rebbe. He had unfettered access. He could walk into the Rebbe and ask the Rebbe any question, and the Rebbe would answer. And so Reuben Dunin went in, edged on by the Hasidim, and he asked the Rebbe, is the person in the story the Rebbe himself? And the Rebbe's answer was fascinating. The Rebbe said it had to be somebody who predated the Baal Shem Tov. It couldn't, so obviously it couldn't be the Rebbe, who was born in 1902. It had to be somebody who predated the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, because the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, he taught world Jewry how to be unselfish. You see, spiritual bliss, what that person experienced, only he benefited from it. Nobody else benefited from it. He experienced that spiritual bliss. If he would have taken the money, can you imagine how much good he could have done for other people with that money? Can you imagine the tzedakah that could have been given, the jobs that could have been created for his co-religionists? Right? So that's fascinating. You can just stop there and think about that for a second. What the Rebbe was saying is that the holiest thing would have been for this person to take the money so that he could altruistically help other people. In other words, by taking this bliss, this spiritual ecstasy, he actually did something that was less holy, less sacred. The most sacred thing we can do is assist somebody else. That's why God put us in this world, put in this world haves and have-nots. He could have just made everybody rich. You know, Elon Musk was born in South Africa. I was also born in South Africa, did you know? But Hashem said that there have to be wealthy people and people who are not wealthy. so that the wealthy people can assist those who are less wealthy. And that is an act of great sacredness, of great holiness. I'll tell you another incredible story. And I did do some research, not research now, this real research, to see if the story was true. And as far as I can tell, it's exactly what happened. So in London, England, during the war years, there was a Rosh Yeshiva, a head of a rabbinic seminary. His name was Rabbi Shapiro. And he had a handful, a dozen or so, young men, unmarried men, who were studying under his tutelage in this yeshiva during the war years. Now, the war years, it was very tough. In England, England was in the war long before the United States, as you all know, and it was tough. There was a family in England called the Grudzinski family, and they, what?
Yeah, we know.
Some of my best friends. And they had a bakery, and they offered 3-day-old bread, so anything which didn't sell within 3 days, the yeshiva got it. And that's how they sustained themselves during the war years, on the 3-day-old bread. Now the problem was, they were in a different area to where the yeshiva was, and you had to catch multiple buses, public transport, to get there. It was an hour-and-a-half trip, door to door, to get there. Then an hour-and-a-half trip to get back. So it was 3 hours a day. And there was a bacher, there was one of the boys who was studying in the yeshiva, and his name was Moshe. And he went for 3 hours. He woke up very early in the morning, 3:30, 4 in the morning, caught a series of buses, went to the bakery, took the bags of bread and cakes and whatever else they gave him, schlepped it back an hour-and-a-half on the public transport, back to the yeshiva, and he fed the whole yeshiva throughout the war. That. There was another young man. His name was also Moshe. And his job was to knock on the doors of the dormitory and wake up the boys from their sleep so that they should come and learn and daven and pray. So Rabbi Shapiro, who's the head of the yeshiva, stands up one day and he's talking to the boys, and he says to them, you know, I want to give you a blessing. And he turns to the Moshe who went to the bakery, and he says, Moshe, because you bring bread to the yeshiva, I bless you that you should be very wealthy. You should be a philanthropist, and you should bring bread to the Jewish people. Then he turns to the other Moshe and he says, Moshe, because you wake the boys up and you bring them to study Torah, I want to bless you that you should be a great Torah teacher. Right? Does anyone know who the Moshe was who went to the bakery? What his name was?
Right.
Moshe Reichman. Moshe Reichman was the 5th wealthiest man in the world at one point in time. And he was probably the greatest philanthropist, Jewish philanthropist of the last century in terms of the amount of money that he donated to charity. Right? Does anyone know who the other Moshe was?
Sternberg.
Yeah, Rabbi Moshe Sternberg, who wrote a series of books called Chuvas Van Hodos, which is a book on Jewish law. And he's the head of the Beis Din in Yerushalayim. And he's a posek. I knew him. He lived in South Africa for a time, 6 months in South Africa, 6 months in Israel. And when he would come to South Africa, I went to his shurim and I would study with him. So I knew him. And so the bracha came to fruition perfectly, as Rabbi Shapiro had said it would. Do you know that they told Moshe Reichman, they reminded him of that speech that Rabbi Shapiro gave, that prophetic speech that he gave. You know what his reaction was? He said, I remember the speech. And now I wish that I would have been the one to knock on the door. I don't agree with him. Can you imagine if the world didn't have a Moshe Reichman? How many yeshiva buildings would not have been built? How many impoverished people will not have been fed? How many shuls wouldn't have been built? Moshe Reichman's tzedakah was no less holy than Rav Moshe Sternbuch's Torah learning. No less holy. And in fact, an argument could be made, and that's what the Rebbe said, essentially, about the Baal Shem Tov, an argument could be made that it's more holy. That Moshe Sternbuch should have regretted knocking on those doors. And he should have rather been the one to pick up the bread. The peace system, I'll skip that in the interest of time. And I'll conclude with this, because our time for today is almost up. Coffee. Now, I'm really doubting if I should make this confession or not. Because I'm sure as soon as I'm going to make this confession, I'm going to alienate 2/3 of you. So, should I do it?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Everything that I say over here stays here, right? Including the live stream, right? It doesn't go out on the live stream.
It's already out.
It's already out. Okay, too late. So, okay, here it is. I'm really weird. I don't like coffee. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But I have friends who like coffee, and they tell me, my friends tell me, that this is how you make coffee. You take the bitter coffee bean, and you put some sugar in. You take hot water, and you put cold milk in. So you take something that's bitter, and something that's sweet, and something that's hot, and something that's cold, and you put it all together. And then you sit down, and you say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. You bless Hashem, shakol niya bidvarei, that everything is created with Hashem's word, that He's behind everything. The sweet, the bitter, the hot, the cold, it's all Hashem. Shakol niya bidvarei, it's all Hashem. So that little cup of coffee is a metaphor for life. And if we can learn that metaphor, if we can learn that behind everything that's happening to us, shahakol niya bidvarei, we can achieve peace. We can achieve tranquility, the serenity, and that anxiety, that thing that kept me up in the night, waking up in cold sweats, what's going to be with the future, all of that goes away. It dissipates. So I bless you all that you should be rich. Because the Rebbe said in 1992, February of 1992, the Rebbe said that we should all be rich. It's an imperative. We have to be rich. So we will be rich. But by the way, I have billionaire friends who are anxious about money. Anxiety has nothing to do with how much money you have. A little bit, but not. But there are other aspects of it as well. So I bless you all as well, that as we go on this journey together over the next 7 days, we should find the incredibly powerful tranquility that is in Sha'ar B'Tachon, that is in these books. We should discover it together. We should remind each other of some ideas that we know, but perhaps we've forgotten, some ideas that are new that we haven't heard before. We should remind each other. We should strengthen each other because B'Tachon is a constant service. It's a constant work. The work of B'Tachon never ends. All throughout your life, at every stage, whatever Hashem throws at you, whether it's the bitter or the sweet or the hot or the cold, whatever happens, we constantly need to work on our B'Tachon. We need to work on that B'Tachon. We need to grow. And as we go through the next 7 days together, we will indeed strengthen each other. And that is my blessing to you. Strengthen the B'Tachon and have the awesome rewards that come from a person who lives with B'Tachon, who lives with Hashem. Thank you so much.